Soko.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Rob?
I'm fine, thank you. Welcome to this episode, another episode of Unyielding Voices.
Glad to have another episode.
How have you been? It's been a crazy couple of weeks.
Yeah, been good. A lot of things happening, but yeah, we keep moving and seeing how it goes. So yeah, I'm good and I'm glad to be here.
Agather and Boniface were arrested when they tried to, when they were going to Tanzania.
They were actually in Tanzania.
They were already in Tanzania, yes.
Yes.
When they got arrested and disappeared.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So one, I guess the most important question, one of the most important, I would consider it redundant if there was no need to answer. But then there's always a need to answer people and get to let them know the truth. But because there's a sort of unity with the oppressive end of things, so there has to be unity with the pushback in the kind of activist side of the space. So the regional solidarity movement basically came into place for that. That you have Kizza Besigye in jail, you have Tundu Lissu in jail, you have Riek Machar in jail, you have Kenya. Kenya doesn't have an opposition leader now, I think. Raila Odinga is more or less the deputy president. And then you have the former deputy president saying that the state is trying to arrest him. So yeah, I guess the idea of the regional solidarity comes from that then the activists unite. So you have Martha Karua, Agather Atuhaire, Boniface Mwangi, Andrew Karamaji, some of the many celebrated regional activists coming together. But I must say that when Tundu Lissu appeared in court for the second time, I think he had appeared first around the time he was arrested, the day before probably, and the second time he came to court, should have been about 24th or 25th April. I was in Dar es Salaam.
Okay.
Yeah, I was part of the same movement that had gone to witness what was going on in his case. But of course, it was so unfortunate they didn't let us in. People were arrested that day. We ended up interviewing people who were beaten. Supporters of his party were beaten and those were disappeared. So that is the essence of the regional solidarity movement, the East African regional solidarity movement, that activists also come together. And for the case of Tundu Lissu, is that they were just going to witness what was happening in court and share. The same thing they did with Besigye. Martha Karua has been in Uganda for Besigye's case, in and out. She's part of his lead lawyers now. I think actually she's the lead counsel in the case, which is a very good thing. So you have a lady who was the Justice Minister of Kenya, very, very passionate about rule of law, activism, human rights, leading charge there. That is very, very pivotal for everything. Now, so Agatha, Boniface flew to Tanzania for the second hearing.
Yeah. The
court was basically, because the Tanzanian state wanted to try him in camera, meaning that it would not be an open court. And he challenged that. So for that decision, Agatha goes to Tanzania with Boniface and all these other people. And the poor turned away from the airport. So you have my friend Gloria Kimani, you have Lynn, you have Martha Karua. They were turned away from the airport. So they didn't even get to the... And then the Agathas get in, they're in their hotel room. Boniface Mwangi, people knock at his door late in the night, maybe like at 5 or 4 a.m. in the morning. He tweets about it, makes noise and says, oh, you guys, this is a very unprofessional way to do it, but this is happening to me. So I'm told that in the morning, Boniface called Agatha and Agatha said this herself, that Boniface said, I am supposed to check out of this hotel by around midday. But since you are going to the court case, it means that I'll still be that side by that time. So I want to leave some of my luggage with you.
Yeah.
So Agatha picks the bag of Boniface and takes it to her room. Now, the Tanzanian security come, after Boniface makes the noise, they retreat. Not out of the hotel, but from Boniface's room and door. So they go out and within the precincts of the hotel as they wait for the morning, the daybreak. So much later as they're having breakfast, they come. And then they want to get I think they wanted his gadgets, laptop, phone and all that. But then they search and he doesn't have them. So they say, let's go and search his room. They're not there. Then they connive with Serena Dar es Salaam hotel security who show them the video footage. And the video footage shows that Agatha picked a bag from the room. So they think that Agatha is hiding evidence, which is a very, very false thing, because then they get Agatha and say, let's go and search your room. When they go to search Agatha's room is inaccessible using the card the key, in other words, that Agatha was given, that she had accessed the room all along. So when they saw the video footage,
they locked the key.
They instructed the hotel management to change the lock. To change the cards. So the card was unable to get in, which means that Agatha couldn't get in and didn't get in before that time. So of course they call the guy comes with the MasterCard, the card gets them in, they search her room, and there's no evidence that she has anything from Boniface as a phone or laptop or any gadget, the things they want. Then that's when they get angry, they begin to think, oh, you're playing games and all that. Yeah, but it ended up in a very, very nasty way. I've talked to Agatha and she said she didn't expect it to escalate to that much. She expected that, oh, they would call me, caution me, maybe deport me. But then it gets so nasty, she's tortured, she's held incommunicado, sexually abused, and kept in jail from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I think it's about Tuesday when they start driving, or Wednesday when they start driving, and then she's dropped at the border on a Friday, late in the night. She's dropped at the Kenyan border, the Ugandan border. But of course, Boniface had been dropped the day before. Basically, because the distance from Dar es Salaam to the Kenyan border is shorter than the distance from from Dar es Salaam to Mutukula. Yeah, so that's what happened. And it was so nasty. It was so avoidable. It was so unnecessary. It was so shameful, both to the Tanzanian state. If we talk about the East African community, and we talk about these things in very grand terms, you know, from a historical perspective, Kwame Nkrumah really wanted this thing that Africa becomes a country. Like you have the United States of America, that Africa becomes that all of us are states. That is, you're going to Africa, but there's a state in Africa called Uganda. You're going to Africa, but there's a state in Africa called Kenya. That's what Kwame Nkrumah had the vision for. But Nyerere, who had a similar vision, had a different approach. For him, it was like, let's just get the regional groupings going. So you get the East African community, you get ECOWAS, you get SADC, you get the Sahel states. If these states united, then you could achieve the means to that end. Now, it's important to note that that's why I'm bringing in that thing, that it is Nyerere's vision. And Nyerere was a pioneer and a champion of the East African community. Free movement of the people. I come from West Nile, and I know for a fact that their relatives, the people who probably have DNA very similar to mine, who live across the border in DRC, who live across the border in South Sudan. Of that fact, I am sure. If you come from Teso, they're probably your brothers in Kenya.
Yes.
If you come from Isingiro, they're probably your brothers and sisters the other side in Tanzania. So yeah, the shameful bit of this is that these are East African citizens holding their East African passports, who on paper should go anywhere in East Africa. In East Africa, without trade, to buy property with basic legal requirements here and there, to even marry startup families across the border with minimal interference. Yeah. But then it seems that the regional leaders seem like, okay, you can do that, but you can't do it for activism. And of course, to their credit, the Ugandan government, it's commendable. Sometimes when someone does even the basic thing, the right thing, which even if it's anyway, you commend them. Just commendable that the Ugandan government actually seems to understand that they let Martha Karua come and handle the case. Gloria Kimani has been in and out of Uganda a couple of times following the case. And there's nothing. They're not interfering with the case, which is the same thing Agatha and Boniface are going to do. They're not going to interfere with the case. Yeah. They're just going to monitor, like, how is this case going? What can we learn from here? What expertise can we bring? Yeah? Because I'm sure if such a solidarity existed in the 1970s, it would have been very helpful to Ugandans who were facing the oppression of Idi Amin Dada at that time. So I think, very sad happening.
Yeah, it is very sad. And speaking of the regional solidarity, I think it is something that has been talked about, like, in so many spaces, building that kind of coalition or, solidarity that actually shows up. And I think we saw this with Boniface and Agatha, how everyone in the East African region was concerned, how they showed up, how they organized very fast. I
was impressed.
I was impressed, and I think in a very long time, it's the first time we are seeing this kind of solidarity coming together and being even efficient. Because I'm very sure the pressure that came from around both physically on ground and also online, it was so massive that it could not be ignored. The pressure was too much, so they were forced to release them in that period of time. Because I think they could even have taken longer with them. They've done horrific things to them, but I don't know what could be if there was silence.
It could be worse.
It could have been worse. Maybe they wouldn't be here anymore.
Yeah, I talked about this in the first episode. We did remember that each time you're arrested, your prayer is that some people speak up for you. If they don't, if a state like Uganda or Kenya or Tanzania picks you and no one is following up,
caring,
worst, you expect the worst. Yes, but it's really commendable. The Kenyan activists, they're like a breath of fresh air. They're like that cold water on a sunny day, like the Bible says, that just calms you down and you're like, wow, this is so revitalizing. So the Kenyan activists came out full throttle, full force, and they did the most they could. Yeah. They pushed so hard for Boniface to be released. The Kenyan government initially was dragging its feet. The Kenyan government got on board, issued a very scathing criticism of the way the Tanzanian government was handling the case and their citizens involved. And of course, also, same for Uganda. Yeah, the Ugandan activists got up and running. Everyone was saying, "Where is Agatha? What's happening to this lady?" And the Kenyans didn't just ask for Boniface; they also asked for Agatha. I believe many of them have probably never met Agatha. They don't even know what she does. She doesn't have probably the brand name, the recognizable name in Kenya like she does in Uganda. But the Kenyans were like, this is our regional sister, and we must get to know where she is. So that was really commendable. So the whole thing gets going, and it didn't stop there. We were getting calls from people as far as South Africa. Activists in South Africa were getting concerned. You had activists in Rwanda who were getting concerned. You had South Sudan. So it became a very, very big thing. Yeah. In Museveni's book, Sowing the Mustard Seed, he says that one group of people who understand regional integration are smugglers. Like smugglers, for them, they don't respect the borders. They just cross whatever they want to go and do their trade.
Yeah.
I think that is what I saw this, what I could equate this to. You had the regional activists saying, it's not me, it's not someone I know, but then we must push really, really, really hard. Yeah? And the people who didn't like Agatha, I know in Uganda, there's some people who didn't like Agatha, but even them, they came out. And you see, as someone who was at the center of it, there are people who are in the thickest end of the state, of the Ugandan state. And, Agatha and I and others, Agora, have been accused of being anti-establishment, anti-government, anti-NRM, so many anti-things. But then you had people from there also calling and asking and offering guidance and saying, have you written to this one? Do it, even if a formality. Then eventually you had the High Commissioner in Tanzania issuing a statement. And I was like, wow, this is so nice. You get, this is commendable that they're doing something like this. So I feel like that is how it should be. Yeah, the NATO rule. An attack on one is an attack on all. So if there are books that argue that you cannot have a very developed and powerful country in a poor neighborhood.
That's true.
You cannot have Kenya has a very high class, high GDP society, free world and all that if Uganda is in trouble eventually. I mean, if you go to South Africa, one of the problems South Africans face is the porous borders with Zimbabwe. A lot of Zimbabweans facing very hard situations in Zimbabwe.
Coming to South Africa.
Move to South Africa to search for better opportunities and all that. But then sometimes also, a lot of them become a menace.
When they get to South Africa.
Yeah. So that's the thing, that it should get to a point where it's not the presidents of East Africa crisscrossing borders and flying and signing protocols under the summit and issuing declarations. And it should get to a point where Merab thinks, if they're torturing people in Rwanda, I must be concerned. What can I do to help those people? If they're abducting people, and it should not just be activists doing it. Activists should get to a point where they do it for every single person. Yeah, so I felt that was really, really an important juncture, but also an important point of learning, reflection, and something that we need to take with us as activists going forward.
Yes, and let's talk about that shift that we're seeing in how online digital activism is working in Uganda and maybe even the East African region, and how that played so much into the case of Agatha and Boniface, but also with even other cases that we've had locally. So
I think generally resistance to oppression takes the form of mass media. It takes the form of communication. Yeah. So if you read about the French Revolution, that's a very long time ago, but during the French Revolution, the pamphlets, the writers, they played a very critical role. They were writing about the oppression that was going on. They were writing about the conditions of the masses. They were writing about the high spending of the state, of the king, the lavish life the Queen Marie Antoinette was living, and her arrogance. So at the end of the day, it's really mass media that people, and Aaron said it in the episode we did earlier, that you must engage, you must make sure that you're being heard as activists. So for today's era is the era of social media.
It is.
We live in an era where Trump is going to tweet. Yeah, you can be assured of that. As president of the US, he's going to tweet probably the most annoying thing, probably the most important declaration. But even in Uganda, I've argued for long that the Ugandan president, one of the presidents who has most effectively and optimally used Twitter. The president of Uganda tweets an average of, I think, 1.5 tweets a day. Yeah, like yes, he tweets almost on a daily. There's a tweet about this. There was a time when he fired the IGP and fired the security minister on Twitter, tweeted about it. So now we get to a point where social media becomes this thing, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Facebook, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Twitter. So it goes without saying that it then also becomes a massive platform for resisting oppression. So you had with the Agatha abduction and disappearances. Of course, the news first broke on social media.
Yes,
that she's being abducted. Same with Boniface. Boniface shared the news himself. Then activists who cannot go to Kenya, Tanzania at that point, they're like, what can we do from where we are? And many of them say some very, very radical, they take some very, very radical approaches. I mean, go to a point where the Tanzanian government limited Twitter. They restricted Twitter because it's becoming too much for them. They hacked some of the things and all that. There's something called ethical hacking, and I would argue any day that is ethical hacking. What they did that day. So then you have them going to the WhatsApp of the ministers and the MPs who are making very ridiculous statements on the floor of parliament and demanding accountability from them, checking their education credentials and trying to...
WhatsApp numbers, publishing them online.
It was so interesting, yes.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is that today, 2025 Uganda, 2025 Kenya, 2025 Tanzania, 2025 East and Africa and the world is one of the digital era. So as much as there's going to be a lot of oppression online, there's going to be a lot of resistance of oppression online. A lot of organizing online, a lot of solidarity building, a lot of movement connecting online. And that's what I saw with that.
Yeah, I think it's like a testament to what has been said, like in the last couple of years of the shift since COVID, how we shift, like people, activists, communities shifted from just the traditional ways of protest or of pushing back to the digital spaces. And I think we're beginning to appreciate how powerful the digital spaces are. They're as powerful as going to the streets, as organizing a protest. And now, let's talk about strategy. Let's talk about some lessons and things we can pick from the strategy around Boniface and Agatha's cases. I think there was so much strategizing. It was very strategic in the way they were executed, the actions on ground, as well as the digital actions that were happening. What does it take to actually organize a successful campaign, both online and physically? From your experience with the different campaigns that you've been part of.
I think every case depends on its own facts. There are times where there's a lot of organizing. There are times when they're spontaneous. I talk about the expose of the corruption at Entebbe International Airport. I don't think people sat down somewhere and said, we are going to do this. I think someone just on TikTok said, I have these videos,
this
I'm
is
frustrated,
what happened.
Let me post them. Then it so happened that other people are like, you know what?
This happened
to me.
Well.
This happened to me. This is a big deal. I have a friend who works at Entebbe International Airport. And she was telling me that nowadays they don't allow them to go there with their phones to work.
Oh.
Yeah. So one of two things. One, she said that the good side is that it is because they thought that they were spending a lot of time on phone.
So they were not doing a good job.
That's why the arrogance came in and all that, so that they take away your phone. So you can see that there was some bit of change. Then the second thing is that she said that maybe they're also thinking that they're the ones who share some of those videos, so they are curtailing it. But whichever way it goes, it showed that the message got to the authorities and they got concerned. That is the first thing. The other thing is that for the Agatha's case, things were moving fast. It was like trying to hit a moving target.
Yes.
Something is flying and you have to hit it. You have to keep shifting your focus and aim. There was not, I don't know if there was so much organizing behind the scenes, but I know that there were attempts to coordinate now, to say, who are the activists in Kenya, who are the activists in Uganda, so there were Twitter spaces organized where there was Martha Karua, I think, Faith Odhiambo, the Kenyan Law Society president, the Law Society of Kenya president. There was a space organized with activists from Kenya and Tanzania. So at the end of the day, to go to a point where there was that attempt at centralizing information and seeing how things moved and guiding the direction of things. But generally speaking, I think every single instance will depend on its own facts. There are many times when you can organize, but there are also times when you can't organize, when things must just happen by themselves. People just get frustrated.
Yeah.
And organizing online now in the current era is a very big thing to talk about, because you see, I think the world and Africa changed fundamentally in 2010, 2011. If you remember that time, that was the time of the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring, most of the organizing was done online. People just got together and said, we are hitting Tahrir Square in Cairo. And they hit the square and they spent their days. And the president who had ruled for 30 plus years, Hosni Mubarak, and was preparing to have his son, Gamel Mubarak, take over, was swept away. Everything about him. The next time we saw his photos, he was in the dock with both his sons, Gamel. There's Gamel Mubarak. The other one is called, I forget the name of the other one. Both sons were in the dock with him and facing charges of treason. But then for the lower African side of, I think the governments were learning and saying, we must now be very hard on people who protest, especially physically. So that's around the time when now the city square in Kampala becomes under permanent lockdown.
Yes.
That to this day, if you walk there on a random day,
you'll find,
you notice the police presence
come.
there. The police will be there. Then around that time, you notice that that's the time when now tear gas becomes the norm of the day. There are all these tear gas things around and all that, and the police, and they'll crack down very hard on any form of protest. So people tend to blame people for not protesting. But I feel like Ugandans have probably protested more than most African countries. If you just go back, you had the Mavida riots, the Kawaka Kayunga riots in 2009. You had the walk to work in 2011. Yes, and walk to work happening around the same time of the Arab Spring, got the government here getting very serious, nasty ideas. Then you had, there've been so many protests, the OTT protests, the what. So Uganda, there have been short of protests. The fact that the government has not changed is not evidence that people have not protested. But then you had November 2020, where there were all these killings, no investigation, nothing to hold anyone accountable to this very day. Now, I think self-preservation is important, that people need to stay alive.
Yes, true.
Yeah. That people need to stay alive. So if people decide that organizing online is safer, is better, is more important, but probably less impactful, I don't blame them. That's one. But again, when I say less impactful, I could also point, like I pointed already, several examples where organizing was done physically, and the results disastrous, catastrophic, fatal for the protesters, and yet things didn't change at the end of the day. You get it? Yeah. So I feel like there needs to be that balance. So when I see people organizing online, I feel like many times they do it really well. The message gets to the people. All the protesting that Agora did online with potholes, with Makerere University and so many others. Sometimes people are quick to look for results. Like, what has changed? What has changed? I always quote Li Enlai, the former Chinese prime minister, who was asked what he thought the effect of the French Revolution was about 200 years after the French Revolution happened, and he said it's too early to tell what the results are. So sometimes, probably, if it was 200 years and it was too early to tell, maybe the real effect of what Agora is doing today, what Boniface Mwangi, Agatha, and all these online protesters are doing today, cannot be seen today. Maybe we need to give it at least 20 years, maybe 5 years, 2 years, and then we can see.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to get caught up in what is the victory, like the big victories, and we don't look at the small wins.
Yeah.
And I think the small wins, the small victories are what keeps us going in these struggles.
True.
Yeah, so it's also important to look out for those small things.
Yeah,
I know you want things to change
radically,
very fast. You want your government to change. You want hospitals to be functional. You want roads to be good, but it takes time. And if we put that in mind and focus on the small wins, I know that we would have wished for what happened to Agatha and Boniface and all other, even the political prisoners that we have in Uganda. We would wish that did not happen.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that these events have unfolded, and they have shifted even the public perception of protests, of resistance itself. Like, so it's really very important to celebrate the small wins and to shout them out as loudly as we would if it were the bigger wins. Yeah. Let's talk about, we are heading towards the elections. Things are getting heated around, and there is an anticipation of even more arrests, more disappearances. What would you, I think, advise, if that's the right word? What would you think we should be doing now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's not just Uganda that's heading towards the election. You see, people keep talking about the 2026 elections in Uganda. And then when they say 2026 election, it looks very far.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that the election year in Uganda is this year.
It's this year, exactly.
Yeah, because the elections happen, I think, in January.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2026.
So we have
so 6 months. Election, the election is really
it's here.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you look at nominations, I think, are going to happen in September.
It's already happening, yeah.
The party primary is happening right now. I see NUP has called for interest.
Yeah.
NRM is having its primaries already at the lower level. The Democratic Party, I think, has a delegates conference one of these days very soon. There's a new party announced called the Democratic Front. So there's a lot of political activity going on. The PFF was eventually registered as a political party. So there's a lot of sand shifting under the feet in terms of the political terrain as we get towards the election. But then what I think is important at this moment is that there's need for people to be deliberate in how to ensure that the election is not rigged. Yeah, there's an old saying that failing to plan is planning to fail. I think all groups, the president has been very, very vocal about saying that he was rigged in the last election. He has repeated that claim so many times. I think he has repeated it more than Trump said he was rigged after the 2020 election. But the president has been so deliberate about saying he has been rigged. Bob Wine says he has been rigged. Mao says they've been.
Everyone.
It seems like everyone seems they have been rigged. I think it's important that those people, activists, civil society, the media, all of them come together and sit and say, how do we ensure that the next election is free and fair? Because at the moment, it is still them speaking at a point of pointing fingers. The president says, I was rigged, and he says specifically by NUP in Buganda. NUP says, we are rigged, and they point specifically at the state, that the state rigged them. I don't know who Mao accuses of rigging the DP. But I also know that he says the elections were rigged. So all these groups need to come together and realize that there is a need to ensure the credibility of the election. Yeah, of course, there are those parties that benefit from a discredited election, but this country has had a very nasty history with discredited elections. Whether it was the 1961 election, and I've read literature that says that was one of the most rigged elections ever. 1961, whether it was the April 1962 election, whether it was the 1980 election, whether it was the 2006 election. After the 2011 election, that's when walk to work comes into effect, and walk to work had very severe consequences for the country, economically, politically, socially, in so many spheres. So I think there's a need for all these parties to first of all come together and say, elections are not my thing. Yeah, election is not a state thing. It's not a thing for the state. It's not a thing for NUP. It's not a thing for the country. How do we ensure that the actual winners actually take up the seat? I feel like a lot of Ugandans are now at a point where they have withdrawn. I meet so many Ugandans, very, very educated, very, very intelligent, who say, I cannot vote in Uganda. And when you listen to them, they have a point. They say, why will I vote?
It's going to be
rigged.
Yeah.
And many of them, they can substantiate that argument. They'll show that there's been claims of rigging anti-substantial. So I feel like the president needs the ruling party, for instance, I feel like it has a bigger role to play. They need to cede some ground. Yeah? Why are we appointing the chairperson of the Electoral Commission and firing them just...
This is a beginning of,
yeah.
I mean...
If I am your employee, if you appoint me, most times I'll become your employee
definitely.
and all that. And you know, that was put in the constitution at the time when we had term limits, age limit, and all. Now, in the current circumstances, around the world today, there are many places where the president no longer appoints the commission chairperson because he's an active player in the elections. We need not to be staying in the old constitutional provisions that have been overtaken by events. We need to be as pragmatic. We need to move forward. So, we need to get to a point where people think that if elections are rigged, what is the worst case scenario? What can happen? So to avoid them, what must we do? And we're not having enough discussions around that, around those issues. Yes. But as for civil society and activists, you know, we put a lot of strain on them. But there's only so much they can do. If elections come and the internet is switched off, what more will they do? If elections come and people are getting picked, already people are getting picked today, and the elections are still months away. People are getting picked. Prospective candidates are getting picked. People are saying, I'm going to beat the hell out of them and all that. People are preparing for the worst case scenario. And, you know, I used to work at a place in Tinda, and I learned that, so there were Indians who were the neighbors. They were Indians of Uganda, Ugandans of Indian descent. And I was shocked to learn that so many of them fly out of the country around that time. Yeah, for them, they view it as a war. So they fly out. And that is very, very telling. You're like, something that should be a constitutional exercise that is a normal thing, then gets to a point where people feel like, if there's an election, I am unsafe in this country, I must fly out. The scenarios that happened in November of 2020. Those are things that should, at all costs, we should break a bank. We should do whatever we can, give an arm and leg to ensure that they don't happen.
The abductions happening around towards the elections, I think we tend to react when they happen. So we are more reactive to events. We do not plan for when they happen. So when they happen, we start fumbling around to find solutions to them and to find a way of navigating, you know, those like the election season. And this is the time, maybe even it is too late for us to, we should start thinking about what we will do, because everything that has happened before will happen, and maybe even on a higher scale. So maybe we need to start thinking less reactively. And create, I mean, I've seen there should be ways of navigating internet shutdown, for example. So should we start thinking about it when it happens, or should we now start planning now?
I think people think about it before, but many times they hit a snag. People had gotten used to using VPN when social media is turned off. They're not gotten to a point where internet is turned off as a whole. When internet is turned off as a whole, your chances are really, really limited. And you know, when a government gets to the point of turning off internet, that's a big, big decision, even for them. Because we're in a country where taxes are paid through the internet, a lot of business. A day without internet in Uganda costs so much, even to the government coffers.
Yes, it does a lot.
But the sheer desperation of government that we are going to lose these many billions when the internet is off. But nevertheless, we are going to take that decision.
As long as we maintain that grip.
That's very nasty. It shouldn't get to that point. It shouldn't get to that point. So, yes, it's incumbent upon all of us, the activists, the teachers, the lawyers, every single person who is a Ugandan, who has any form of citizenship about Uganda, or even who is East African and is concerned about the happenings in Uganda, to get concerned and say, how do we ensure that the elections in Uganda are not rigged? You get, so, well, and there's just so much we can do. Because I've been thinking about the internet. I've read about some options that can give you internet when there's internet shutdown, but some of them are very short range. And in any case, if I have internet and the rest of Uganda doesn't have internet,
what does it help?
What does it help you at the end of the day? I think the bigger call should be to the bigger party in this. That's the government and that's the state.
A few weeks ago, we had students protesting from Chambogo University.
Yes.
And we also, we have a lot of young people coming to the streets protesting in the universities, but also protesting things like the ECOP the Stop Hip Hop campaign is also on with the students. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the students, especially in Chambogo University, and generally. I know we have hinted on this in the previous episode where we talked to Aaron about activism in universities. So, what is your perception of the current state of activism in institutions of learning?
It's on its deathbed. It's sick. It's unfortunate. It's going to die if nothing is done, and that would be really sad. You see, the equation, the fact that now activism at university is equated to hooliganism.
Yes,
is very terrible. It's not hooliganism. It's people asking to be heard. And you see, even if you can't have a university or in a place of more than 500 people and address all their demands. So you must leave room for those other people who will come and say, this can be improved. And protests are one key way to understand what can be improved and how much it can be improved. So when I was a student at the university, I participated in protests. And many times, you would see the university changing certain policies, reversing certain policies. And that made the university better, not worse. If you have a professor at the university, say a vice chancellor, who thinks that they're the alpha and the omega, they know it all, protest will crack down on you. You're hooligan and all that. And they have a state that supports them. That's a very dangerous university to be in. Yeah? Because then you're suppressing people's
freedoms.
Anger. When you suppress anger, it just boils over. Someday it will spill over. And if it spills over, it can be very, very dangerous. The Libyans were under one-man dictatorship close to 40 years. When it spilled over, they were like, we can actually forget about the country. Let us just break it down. So people, Ugandans, the average Ugandan was saying, the Libyans are doing well. They have buildings. They have all this. But for them, they remembered that the leader they had called Gaddafi tortured people in a prison and killed them because they protested against the conditions in that prison. So Gaddafi had these wins, public hanging of activists and all that, and they were good for him in the short run. But as long as you have a country to protect at the end of the day, you don't protect a country or a university or any institute by suppressing people's anger. Because once the people vent it out with so much that has been suppressed, you will not have the means to calm it down. There's a famous novel by Alan Payton that says, that is Cry the Beloved Country. My favorite line in Cry the Beloved Country says that I have one great fear in my heart, that someday when they turn to loving, they will find that we are turned to hating. So he was writing this in the context of apartheid South Africa, that these guys have showed us so much hatred. They have showed us that the only thing we can do as white people is to hate the black people, is to oppress them. So, of course, there may come a time when now you have something to lose and you want the love from the other side. You want their understanding. You want them to be reasonable. And you will have pushed them to a point where they don't have that nerve anymore. They've gone beyond it. So when you oppress people at a university and all these places, you must have that heart. I get perturbed in Uganda when someone from the high end of society falls sick or they lose a loved one, and there are people who go to social media and celebrate it.
Very sad.
It is very sad. I would never do that to my worst enemy. But then I also know where they're coming from. I know for a fact that it didn't start with social media. In William Pike's book, Combatants, he writes and says that when there was a rumor in the 1989 that Obote had died in exile in Zambia, and Ugandans put out bonfires and celebrated. And then they were disappointed, of course, because Obote was not dead. But the fact that happened, the fact that people are like, if someone is dead,
that's better for
I have
us.
Cause to celebrate. That is very telling of everything. So the more the Ugandan government feels like we are in charge and we are going to crack, we are going to do all these, misfortunes befall you, and the people, the students you are expelling, and these guys, and they are saying, yes, God has answered our prayers. Can you imagine if you live a life where people wake up every day to pray that something bad happens to you?
Or even children. I think there is a tweet which happened, I think 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, where someone was saying that, posted a picture of the first family and made a comment that, you know, I wish this one died, one of the grandchildren. And,
Very sad.
you know, it's very sad. But you also want to understand where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Like, why would you push people to a point?
Yeah.
How do you sleep at night
If you're a leader like...
knowing that people wish you dead?
If you're a leader like the current state of Uganda, the current leadership of the state of Uganda, these guys came to power and there was so much jubilation.
Yes.
People were so excited. People were so happy. Everything looked up. I feel like if I were in their shoes, maybe I speak out of ignorance, maybe I don't know what they know, but if I was in their shoes for a day, I would think, how did we get to this point?
Yes.
That we started with this euphoria, with this optimism, with this excitement, and now we're at a point where people are wishing us dead, that a historical dies, and people take to Twitter and they're like, good riddance. He said he would kill our children. He said this. And I don't know if they have those conversations. I don't know if these things are shielded from them or they never get to see them. But that is the lowest point a human being gets to.
Go, yeah.
It's not that those people are evil. Those who are doing that. It's not that they're evil. It's that they would also feel bad if you celebrated the death of their relatives. But for them, you've pushed them to a point where they're like, all I have is to wait for you. They call it hate watching on Twitter. Is to hate watch and see when misfortune befalls you, and then I can celebrate that misfortune. Very, very bad state of affairs.
Yeah, it's a very bad state of affairs. We are in such a difficult season, not just for us as the ordinary Ugandans, but also for those that are in power.
Yeah,
it's like a time, we're sitting on a time bomb. It's not good.
Yeah,
it's not good.
No.
But I don't even think these people, I don't know if they care. I don't know if they think about the things that they see online.
Do you think Amin cared?
I don't think they care, really.
So, let's forget the current leadership of Uganda. Do you think Amin cared when he was killing people in 1977? Do you think Gaddafi cared? Do you think Hitler cared when he was sending Jews into gas chambers and killing them and other minorities? So I don't know. I think there's another line in that Cry the Beloved Country where Alan Paton was asking and says, what breaks in a man? I don't remember the full sentence, but he was saying, what breaks in a man when he decides that I'm going to pick a gun and shoot you dead? I'm going to end your life. I'm going to get a knife and I'll drive it through your chest
and kill you
until you're dead. Like, what is it in that man at that point when he's thinking of that? Like, what is broken? Because that is not human nature.
Yeah.
Human nature is to look out for other human beings. You see so many, like I told about the story of Agatha. When Agatha was dropped at the border at 2 a.m., there was a Tanzanian border rider who finds her. And his immediate instinct is,
to
what
help
are you doing
her
here? And Agatha says, I was dropped and all that. And says, in his broken English, he's like, come and sit on my border. I'll ride you across to the Ugandan side. Across the Tanzanian side. We clear with them. We go to the Tanzanian side, Ugandan side. We clear with them. And he dropped her there. And he didn't ask for a penny. He didn't ask for anything in return. So that's how the human beings ordinarily should be, that you look out for each other. You care about other people. You find out. Of course, there are some instances where people don't. People take advantage of others. But getting to the point of saying, I must kill this woman. I must kill this man. Yeah? And they're killing it without any sense of thinking. But if you're torturing people and you're bragging about it on social media, or if you're doing all the kinds of things you're doing, maybe it gets to the point where you must sit down and think and say, to what end? What message am I giving to the side? And Africa is a very interesting continent. The tables always stand in Africa. You have a very powerful president like Ouattara, the former president of Ivory Coast. Very, very powerful. Very, very. And one night, he's dragged from the bunker. The bunker is actually always in the basement. So a basement, but this time not for torturing people, but for hiding. He's dragged from the basement by his vest, by a soldier, holding him and pulling him and taking him to and you're thinking, this guy was a very powerful president. Only hours before that, he could give orders and everyone would listen. But now he's being dragged like this. So we as Africans and people who live in this part of the world, as I conclude, I say our time is up, must always remember that, yes, tables can turn. And if tables turn, how do you want to be treated? Maybe how you'll be treated is how
you treated others. Yeah.
And they learn lessons from you. If you treat
Yeah.
them like dogs,
They
they
will
will have
treat you.
no qualms whatsoever treating you yourself, no matter who you are, like a dog. Whether you're Gaddafi, they'll drag you from the pothole, from the culvert, and you'll scream all your screaming. They'll stab you. They'll do all the sexual graphic things you've read that was done to Gaddafi that day and kill you. And they won't have any fear doing it. They won't have any remorse doing it because you've taught them that's how people should be treated.
Yeah. It's very sad. Very sad. Yeah, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you, Miriam.
Yes, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening in. And please do follow us and share with your community, share with your people, and do let us know of the feedback in the comments. And we are always open and willing to make things better for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See you on the next episode.
Bye. Yes.